I just want to introduce those of us who will be talking tonight. I'm Peter Gray. I'm the chair of the Bike Maryland Board of Directors, and I'll be speaking a bit. Allison.
Hello, everyone. I'm Allison Gillespie. I'm the secretary for Bike Maryland and proud to serve on the executive board. And then we have two other board members that are here helping tonight as well, and several board members who are attending. So special shout out to former board member Bruce Cohen for helping, as he always does with technical stuff, and for Dan Barron tonight for his help.
And Nigel Sammer, who is also
sorry.
Bike Maryland Board.
Good evening, everyone. Just to once again, for those of you that have come in the last couple seconds, we are welcoming you to our overview of the 2025 legislative agenda for Bike Maryland. I am executive secretary for the Bike Maryland Board, and I will be here presenting alongside our chair, Peter Gray. And we have several board members who are also attending, helping, and here to help answer questions. So to get things started, we should say who we are. Bike Maryland, we are a 100% volunteer-driven nonprofit organization that was formed in 1999. We have a mission of promoting bicycling, increasing safety, improving conditions, and providing a voice for bicyclists in Maryland. And over the last couple of years in particular, we've really been trying to increase and hone in on our legislative agenda. But we work with to partner with advocacy organizations across the state and throughout the region, and also with universities, businesses, and all kinds of community groups. I'd be remiss if I didn't say that we definitely need your membership dollars. So please, if you are not already a member, consider becoming a member. And we will talk a little bit about one of our most important ways we have people volunteer is by helping us to advocate. We'll talk more about that as we go through. So tonight we're going to talk about the 2025 legislative session. It's already started. It's already underway in Annapolis. Prior to now, we met as a board. We set our priorities. We discussed what different bills we would like to specifically focus on. We are also tracking a number of bills. We've met with potential sponsors of those bills in the legislature. And we sent a budget letter to Governor Moore and to the MDOT, the Maryland Department of Transportation Secretary. Also, we've got some ongoing other efforts that are outside the legislative session. You may know, of course, that there's an effort to try to get bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure facilities on some new bridges that are coming, most notably the Key Bridge and the Chesapeake Bay Bridge. We sent letters for those two bridges in support of bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure on those. Our agenda is really simple. I'm a person who always likes to know what's coming when I attend a webinar, so I think this might be the simplest slide I ever made in my life. But first, Peter's going to review our legislative priorities, and then I'm going to briefly discuss some ways that you can be an effective advocate, either in Annapolis in person or in your own district in the state. Peter, I think from here, I'll let you take it, and I'll put my video off.
Thank you, Allison. So the session started a little over 2 weeks ago. The deadline for the governor to introduce budget bills happened after a week of the session. The first sort of salient deadline on the 3rd of February, bills have to be introduced in the Senate, although the Rules Committee can consider late bills. The House introduction bill deadline is on the 7th of February. And again, the House Rules Committee can consider late bills. Very important date, February 11th, Tuesday. Bike Maryland's having its symposium in Annapolis. We'll be meeting at City Hall, having some people talk to us and sort of go over the bills that we're going to have, and then unleash the attendees to go to meetings that will have been previously scheduled with offices of senators and delegates that those attendees live in those districts. March 17th, crossover day. If a bill has not passed one chamber or the other, it is officially dead. March 31st is the deadline to pass a budget. And then the last day of this General Assembly is April 7th. Next slide. So here we are at last year's Bike Symposium in the City Hall of Annapolis. So you get a chance to network with other bike advocates from around the state, learn about advocacy issues from experts, visit your own electeds, and you have to register ahead of time. Last time I saw, we have a limit of 125 people in that room in City Hall, and we have, I think, over 100 people already registered. So if you want to go to the Bike Maryland web page, and you can easily find a way to register. We'd like to thank our sponsors, people who have given donations both for the symposium and to support Bike Maryland in general. Central Maryland Transportation Alliance and Velo City Riders Cycling Club have given very generous donations. And then other donations have been given by Mid-Atlantic Off-Road Enthusiasts, Bike Hoco, which is in Howard County, Oxon Hill Bicycle and Trail Club, the Western Maryland Wheelman, Jarrett Stoltzfus and Wayne Clark, and Celsius Drinks, who's going to be providing some refreshment at the symposium. It doesn't end after the symposium or even after the legislative session is over. We want you to be talking to your delegates and senators year-round about biking issues. Invite them to meet with you or even ride bikes together. Give them some reasons why safe biking and access to trails matters. And you can track bills on your own and submit written testimony. There's a how-to on this topic on the Bike Maryland website.
And we're also going to be talking about this more in detail at the end after we go over the bills. So that's just a little bit of a warming up taste, but we'll go into a little bit more in detail on that.
So, what are the priority bills for 2025 that Bike Maryland has designated? We have a list of 4: bikes on sidewalks, bicycle safety yield, Transportation and Climate Alignment Act, and vulnerable road user enhanced safety bill. I'll go over all these bills in some detail, but basically these are the ones that we are going to make sure that we are focused on the progress of it. If there's a need for us to ask you and our other advocate contacts in the state to weigh in with emails and calls to your senator or delegates, we'll let you know. But these are sort of the 4 top priorities. So bikes on sidewalks, sponsored in 2025 by Delegate Dana Jones and Senator Jeff Waldstreicher, who also introduced this bill last year. Basically, the headline for this is, right now, statewide, it is illegal for people to ride their bikes on sidewalks unless the local jurisdiction allows it. And there are counties like Montgomery County and Howard and a handful of others that have allowed biking on sidewalks, but it's only now allowed if those local jurisdictions pass a law legalizing it. We want, at the very least, we want to avoid disproportionate policing impacts for people of color who are just trying to stay safe by riding on sidewalks and are sometimes pulled over by the police and we think that this should not happen. And so what the bill does is it flips the default. It says you can ride your bike on a sidewalk anywhere in the state of Maryland unless the local jurisdiction decides to restrict it in some way, shape, or form. Last year, it sailed through the House, only had 2 votes against, but the Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee did not vote on the bill, and so the bill died. There are hearings in the Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee on the 31st of January, and the House Environment and Transportation Committee on February 6th. Bicycle safety yield. This is sort of colloquially known as an Idaho stop or stop as yield bill. It was sponsored, that should actually say 2025. Senator Will Smith is the sponsor. He's the chair of the Judicial Proceedings Committee, and delegates Regina Boyce and Vaughn Stewart are sponsors in the House. It allows a bike to treat a stop sign like a yield sign, and it makes biking through intersections safer by making cyclists more visible to cars. So instead of coming up to a stop sign, having to get off your bike and then get back on to start, if you approach an intersection and you see that there's no cross traffic, nobody making a left, that way you are able to sort of stay ahead and in full view, better view of the cars behind you. 11 states and Washington, D.C. now have such laws allowing that practice. And there's guidance by the National Highway Traffic Administration that endorses those kinds of measures that are in the state. In last year's session, it passed the House pretty easily, but again, judicial proceedings did not vote on the bill. The House Environment and Transportation Bill Committee has a hearing scheduled for January 30th, and we did secure a commitment by the chair of judicial proceedings to move this earlier in the session than last year. Transportation Climate Alignment Act. This is sponsored by Delegate Mark Edelson and Senator Shelley Heddleman. It will require MDOT and regional planning agencies to measure and mitigate any increases in climate pollution, greenhouse gas emissions, and vehicle miles traveled that would be caused by a planned highway expansion project costing over, I'm not sure if it's $10 million, over a certain amount. I think it's between 5 million and 400 million are the projects that are covered. If you have that kind of project that's put into the pipeline as a new project and will cause increases in climate pollution and vehicle miles traveled, there has to be mitigation action taken that would sort of mitigate that impact of the increase in GHG and VMT. What's a mitigation action? More access to mass transit, protected bike infrastructure, expanding remote work options, locating jobs and amenities near residential housing, et cetera, et cetera. There are 2 states, Colorado and Minnesota, that passed laws like this in the last few years. In 2024, it did pass the House fairly easily. It got almost all the way through the Senate, but then on the last day did not receive a 3rd vote and died on the last day of the session. So we're hoping to have this progress a little more quickly. And also there's been negotiations between advocates for this. There's a lot of environmental groups like Sierra Club, League of Women Voters, all sorts of different groups, including Bike Maryland. And there were negotiations with the Maryland Department of Transportation to try and avoid some of the pitfalls that were identified in last year's bill. And so hopefully this one will make it through this year. And then vulnerable road user enhanced safety. Last year, you see a picture of Dan Langenkamp next to his wife Sarah's ghost bike. She was killed biking in a bike lane on River Road in Bethesda. The driver of the truck that crushed her and killed her basically walked away with a fine and made, I think, some community service. This would enhance the penalties under law if you the bill that was passed last year allowed for up to 2 months of incarceration if somebody, a driver, kills a bicyclist in a bike lane. This vulnerable road user law exists on the books already, would allow for penalties up to 2 months of incarceration, just like the Debing-Langenkamp bill did last year, and like a bill passed previously. If you hit somebody in a crosswalk, you're liable for up to 2 months of incarceration, not just a fine. So this would sort of make that all, if you hit a vulnerable road user, a bicyclist, a pedestrian, etc., anywhere in the road, that you'd be subject to that possible penalty. There are a lot of other bills that we are following. This is most of them on this page. There's a bill, no stopping, standing, or parking in a bike lane, sponsored by Delegate Guyton and Senator Muse. It had a hearing in the Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee yesterday, and it's going to have a hearing in the House Environmental and Transportation Committee on the 30th. It will do exactly what it says. It would not allow cars to stop, stand, or park in a bike lane. This is obviously a safety measure because if you're biking in a bike lane and then suddenly you have to swerve out into traffic with the cars, that is not safe. And so we are hoping that this will make progress. So enough about that. There's the Bicyclist Safety Start bill, HB 422, which was offered by Delegate Polakovich-Carr. It allows bicyclists to begin moving where there's a leading pedestrian interval. So what am I talking about? If you're at an intersection at a red light, cars are stopped, you're stopped, pedestrians stopped, and then the walk sign or countdown clock for pedestrians starts a few seconds before the cars are allowed to stop. This would allow bicyclists to start going forward with the pedestrians, and like bicycle safety yield, would be a safety measure because you would make the bikes more visible to the cars behind you. And there's a hearing in the Environmental and Transportation Committee on February 6th. Graduated speed camera fines. This has been sponsored by Delegate Vaughn Stewart and Senator Jeff Waldstreicher. Right now, in most contexts, if you are speeding in the state of Maryland, say on a highway or whatever, where the speeding can go to over 100 miles an hour. Right now, whether you are 13 miles over the limit or 50 miles over the limit, the fine is the same. This would allow for those fines to increase and for there to be an increased disincentive for people to drive in a wildly dangerous manner. This is would compare to a law that was passed last year after several highway workers were killed in a work zone on the Baltimore Beltway by a reckless driver. This would also allow for a sort of a graduated set of fines so that hopefully people would be more cautious about the way that they speed. It is supported by MDOT, and again, it's the same as what's in place for the work zone infractions. There's also a local bill that's been, I think this is the third year, on Maryland 210, Indianette Highway, where there's been enormous amount of fatal crashes. And again, everybody gets the same fine, and it would allow for graduated fines. And then finally, there's a sort of the first attempt in several years to try and modify the contributory negligence rubric that is only the law in Maryland, Alabama, and a few other states. Uh, uh, I think it was 2 years ago, there was a carve out that was created for bikes and pedestrians and whatever. Uh, the concept here being that if you're in a crash, you're biking along, and the somebody hits you and injures you, and craters your bike. Um, that if the judicial proceeding were to find that you were even 1% at fault, that would mean that you contributed to the crash and your recovery would be zero. In 46 states, there's a comparative negligence framework where if you are 1% at fault, then your recovery goes down by 1%. If you're 10% at fault, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a much more fair system, and it means that the cars are not allowed to sort of get away with murder, as it were, just because you might have done one little thing that was not correct. And so we'll see. This is something that is going to be challenged mightily by the insurance industry. They want to maintain the system the way it is, and we will see how this goes. Right now, it's only been offered in the House, and there is no Senate bill. There's one bill, and this is sort of an unusual position for us to take, that we actually absolutely oppose. There's a bill that would mandate registration, titling, and insurance for anybody who owns an e-bike, just like we have in the state for people who drive cars. It would be a significant disincentive for somebody to own an e-bike if all these onerous requirements are laid upon them. And anything that makes it harder to own a bike reduces the number of bikes on the road and makes it less safe to ride. Remember, the thing that increases safety of cyclists is more cyclists. There was a hearing that was held yesterday in the Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee, and it's unclear how much support this will get.
So, we would like to encourage you to begin to advocate on these bills. Ideally, we would love to have you at our bike symposium, but we realize, first of all, not everyone can take a day off in the middle of the week to come to Annapolis. And for many people, going all the way to Annapolis is a long distance trip. So we are very cognizant of the fact that many of you will be doing all kinds of in-person advocacy in your district throughout the year. So I think it would be good if we could talk about a few advocacy basics that we have learned. One thing you want to do is build relationships with your 3 delegates and your senator. And as the expression goes, play the long game. You're building relationships over a series of years, and you want to try to become a familiar face, and if possible, also an expert source for them. So if something comes up about biking, they're going to say, "Hey, I know that Shirley in my district, she knows everything about biking. She bikes all the time. I see her on her bike all the time. I'll give her a call and ask her what she thinks about this, that, or the other thing." That is actually some of the most helpful kinds of advocacy you can do. No matter what, when you're speaking and you're talking about your what you would like your elected officials to do, always try to keep it authentic. one of the best markers of success in advocacy is if you tell a elected official a story from your life, just a simple story about a struggle you've had at a particularly dangerous intersection, or a friend you lost to a tragic crash, or even just a worry you've had about your children biking. If you know you've been successful, if later you hear them tell those stories in their speeches, that's a huge mark of success. And in fact, many politicians over the years have expressed to me that some of the most helpful kinds of advocacy is when you give them those stories and load them up, because then when they're going out and they're doing the dealing with their fellow elected officials, they have those anecdotes in hand and they will talk about Shirley and her biking in their own district. Always when you're meeting with an elected official, take notes. It's good to keep those notes over time. And if you happen to have a meeting with them in person, take a photo. Politicians love that kind of publicity. Politicians love selfies. And you can be sure to post it to your social media and tag them with just a very friendly, low-key message. Um, After you talk, always follow up with a thank you note. As old school as that is, even just a simple text or email to them and their office staff is really effective. Also, one thing that is often really hard to do for a lot of us, just because we're all so busy, but following a bill, and then if the bill passes, being sure to follow up with your elected official again. And if there was some reason that they didn't support the bill, having a very low key, not confrontational conversation, but just checking in with them and saying, so what was it that prohibited you, from being able to support that? And then helping us by reporting back that intel, letting us know, hey, my senator didn't feel comfortable about that bill because it lacked this aspect, or it emphasized the wrong things. That can help us over the years to build better bills. Also, after the legislative session is over, it ends in April, as Peter was saying, um, circle back on those bills again, even if, whatever way possible, and just see what you can find out in general about them and follow them from year to year. That's kind of the gold standard, I think. So one question that comes up a lot at the state level is, should you testify or even just send in written testimony? Um, it's very different on the state level. One of the things I've been learning over the last couple of years is I've become, I spend a lot of time testifying and doing a lot of advocacy in my own local county, in Montgomery County. The state level is very, very different. Testifying is quite a process. I will share with you a story that years ago, my fellow advocate Chrissy Daphnis and I went to testify on a bill, and we were going to be the only people testifying. It was a bill about enhancing road safety around school construction. And we arrived early in the morning, and then lo and behold, the bill that was ahead of ours had about 73 people lined up. And we ended up spending hours and hours just sitting in the lobby waiting to testify for our 3 minutes. So if you're going to do it, just lock in and know that the process is long and can be arduous. Sending in testimony, written testimony, is subject to what I find to be rather arcane rules and procedures. It's a difficult process sending in the testimony. So you can't leave it to the last minute. If you know that a bill is coming up, you need to actually scope out the date of the bill. And then there's rules about the number of days ahead of time that you can submit the testimony, um, even in writing. And it's like banker's hours, which I find very onerous as a person who works 9 to 5 and can't do anything during the day with advocacy. Testimony that you write needs to be short, and it should always feature in writing why it's good for the state, because you figure that testimony will get shopped around. And if you do happen to sit and talk to the greater committee there, it's important to emphasize the state. But interestingly, one interesting thing that happens on the state level with advocacy is that conversations with your delegates and your senators really need to highlight, we've been told this several times by several senators, really should highlight why bikes and safer roads are good for their particular district. They are very, very focused on their district. So keeping that in mind as you craft your testimony is a good idea. Now, I brought up some things about the arcane rules, and you have to count backwards, and you have to know what day and everything, and you may feel very overwhelmed. Don't worry, we got you covered. We did a huge deep dive on this. Our Bookfellow board member, Dan, last year made this really excellent webinar that's available on our YouTube channel. You can just go and look it up on YouTube. It's the 2024 Basics of Legislative Advocacy, and he really breaks it down, and you can even take the cursor bar and zone in on the parts that you need to figure out. But there are a few basic things that you should do if you're going to follow certain bills. Creating a My MGA account is important, and then linking to each of those 4 bills would be helpful. And you can follow them in real time as they make their way through the legislature. At this point, we are you are welcome to ask questions, and we'll open it up to conversation, and I'll stop sharing the screen.
Setting up a MyMGA account is not too terribly difficult. What isn't easy is finding the bill numbers that you're most interested in. And so we will post this presentation on the website. So, you don't have to have taken notes or whatever. All this information will be there. In the presentation itself, there are links to all of our priority bills and bill numbers for all the bills that we have been discussing tonight. Ted is asking if we testified against SB 14 yesterday. The answer is we sent a letter that had sign-ons from bike groups around the state noting our opposition to the bill. We were sort of a little, we wanted to see how it went in the committee because we didn't want to give it more oxygen, so to speak, than we felt it was warranted. And so, but, if it seems like it's going to start to make some progress through judicial proceedings, then we may have a more direct effort in the House to oppose the bill. And Melissa is pointing out helpfully that you can search bills by keyword, but again, that could be kind of, it's hard to know exactly what keywords are in the bill. The titles that I gave the bill have some of the words that are in the bill titles, but it isn't sort of exactly parallel what those bills, what the actual name of the bill is.
So I wanted to note, Melissa's pointing out something important that others have brought up about the bill that would allow a head start at the pedestrian intervals, which is that if you're in a jurisdiction where you don't have the legal right to ride on the sidewalk, then you don't have the legal right to ride in the crosswalk. So that is, we would, in the ideal world, we will hope that both of those bills get passed, but it is something to note as we'll pass that on to the lawmakers we're working with on that. May need to be adjusted if both of the bills that the bikes on sidewalks and the Head Start bill don't get passed. We may need to adjust one to make up for the other. Helpful information.
There's a couple other bills that we hope will make good progress in the General Assembly. There's a bill that would allow, I think it's around school zones. I can't remember exactly the context, but it would allow SHA, the State Highway Administration, to lower the speed limit on their roads by 5 miles an hour without allowing, without requiring a traffic study, which is very costly and is a disincentive sometimes for jurisdictions to lower their speeds. Um, the one thing that the other thing that I did not mention in my presentation, we did send this letter about the budget to the governor and to Secretary Wiedefeld. Um, the Lanphier Bikeways Fund is something that has existed for several years. It mostly gives grants to local jurisdictions to help give them money to engage in design activities for bike infrastructure. Um, the amount of money per year had been as high as $7.5 million, which still is not much. The initial proposal that we saw would have lowered that to 2.1 million. And now I think it's a little bit above 3 million a year. So at least we made some progress on that. But I think we need to realize that when budget times are better, we need to be very, very aggressive in pushing for more money for that fund and more money committed by agencies like the State Highway Administration to creating safer biking and walking infrastructure. Any other questions that people have? We didn't mention them as a sponsor, but the Maryland Health Safety Office, Cynthia Spriggs is on this call, has given the Washington Area Bicycle Association a grant to hire or give stipends to some high school students in Prince George's County to do safer street work. And that has been a program that's now in its second year. And we're hoping that Bike Maryland and WABA will get a grant to give out helmets and lights for no cost at events around the state. And so we are really happy about that partnership with MHSO, and we also are very happy about our ability to get time with people in the Secretary's office and State Highway Administration to meet with them and to sort of collaborate and share our concerns and their concerns back and forth. And so part of the reason that we ask you to support Bike Maryland is because we're able to do things like this, put on these webinars that Allison has organized, and we, are able to employ a paid lobbyist during the legislative session and to support all sorts of advocacy activities, both during the session, the bike symposium, and then outside the session to have meetings with agency officials and elected officials during the year.
One of the things we are hoping this year, we've set a goal to do this year, is to post updates as regularly as our busy working schedules will allow, but updates about the bills making their way through the legislature to social media, to our social media accounts. So this is a good time for me to remind everyone that we do have accounts on Facebook, and we just got a Blue Sky account. It's so new that I have yet to even get a Blue Sky account for myself yet, but both of those, we have let our X account kind of go fallow, so we probably will not be posting anything there in the upcoming months, but that is a good place to follow us to keep abreast of things going on. And we do post advocacy alerts there as well. So new issues that come up, like being able to give feedback about the bridges, for instance, we had posted that to our social media accounts. It's sort of an alert to let people know. So do follow us.
Well, No,
Go
go
ahead,
ahead,
Peter.
Allison.
I think you and I are both about to say, I don't think we have any other questions coming in. So I think we might, unless it's your
Um,
last chance.
right. Oh, let me put my email address in the chat. So anybody wants to try and get a hold of me, please send me an email. Um, and right, like Bruce has just posted, we'll post a recording of this webinar and I think have a link to the presentation on our website. Again, if you go to the website, it's very easy to find a link to register for the bike symposium and also to see what upcoming events under the events tab are taking place and to look at recordings of past webinars that we have had and we will continue to have. Cynthia, we're going to hand out at the bike symposium something that hopefully will just be a one-page sheet that you can give the people that you meet with, and it will have the bill numbers and some talking points about why we support those bills. And at the symposium itself, we will spend probably the better part of an hour talking about these things and answering your questions about it. And that will include going over why we think that these bills are a good idea for the state of Maryland.
Oh, and also, Cynthia and others that might be wondering, if you have never attended our bike symposium before, we kind of alluded to this in the beginning, but one of the key reasons to attend is that we will have appointments set for you just as an attendee. When you arrive, you will be given a time that an appointment has been made for you to meet with your senator or delegate or their staffer. And you will walk over with other people from your district to the office of your delegate or senator in order to have conversations. So it's kind of nice because it really we try to pre-package it so that it really does make the most of your time in Annapolis that day.
Nigel has posted MBPAC, the Maryland Bike Pedestrian Advisory Committee, has also made some legislative recommendations, including the ones that we listed, but a broader set. And you can find them at the link that Nigel put in the chat.
Well, seeing that there are no more questions, there's some very good discussion happening, but about the gas tax. But other than that, I'm not seeing any new questions. Well, thanks everyone. We appreciate your time tonight. We look forward to working with you. Reach out and let us know how it goes. If you get, again, if you get good feedback or sometimes negative feedback from your electeds, let us know. Help us out by letting us know what you're hearing. It's very, very helpful information for us.